Welcome to the Laws of Style, featuring conversations on creativity, fashion, and the law from the leading edge of our economy and culture. Hosted by noted fashion lawyer Douglas Hand.
Hello, and welcome to the Laws of Style. I'm your host, Douglas Hand. And for this episode, I'm joined by designer Billy Reid. Billy, thanks for being with us.
Thank you. Such a pleasure. Really an honor to be here.
Well, so you're based in Florence, Alabama. And when menswear design and Florence are mentioned, often people think of Florence, Italy. Can you comment on being outside, at least geographically, the sort of established fashion system and how that's informed your brand?
It's been, certainly being outside of, a big fashion hub. It can have its challenges for sure. You can't, I was based in New York before, so running to 38th Street to get buttons or whatever you might need to get the sample made. You don't have quite have those luxuries in a small town, Florence, Alabama, like we're in. But there, there's that challenge. You're not at every event. You're not in front of all the editors and maybe some of the things you should be at are the protocol that might say should be in the fray. But there's also so many advantages to it. I mean, for me, just being able to sort of have, we sort of made work around our life, not life around our work, so my wife's from Florence, Alabama. We were able to raise our family here. That's a very comforting thing. But, I think it also kind of sets us apart, and it gives us a little bit different perspective when you can see a different part of the country and dig in on I grew up in the South. I'm from South Louisiana. Those influences inform the collection as much as my time in New York or Los Angeles. All of those things inform it. But for me, it just it creates a well-rounded perspective, I think, for us is, kind of having an understanding of not just what people are wearing, in a major city, but also, what's the country, what's the rest of the world wearing,
Yeah. Well, descriptors like lived in luxury or broken in luxury have been used often to describe the line. How do you feel about those descriptions? Is that the aesthetic you're going for? And is that kind of part and parcel with being in the South?
It can be a little bit, I guess, associated, people in the South, I guess you do feel that sense of comfort, in some ways. But yeah, the lived in luxury, broken in luxury, those were not things we kind of came up with on our own. People just kind of associated it with the collection. And I feel like we do take a lot of care when you go to the rack. We want something to feel like you can put it on right then and there's not really a break-in period. Maybe that's not true with like a pair of rigid, selvage denim, but for the most part, even like leather jackets, I mean, we love to put a wash on it where it looks like it's something you've had for years. I think that our customers have come to expect that sort of built-in comfort. And I really think for us, I mean, I like to call it usable luxury. This is something, sometimes luxury can be portrayed as precious. And, there is a precious part to it. Obviously we're trying to select, fantastic, beautiful fabrications and that have unbelievable hands, but, you want people to wear it, more than anything else. And, I want someone to grab that coat and to be their favorite coat they've ever had. Whatever that piece is, you just want it to be that something that they're going to have in their closet for years. A lot of times I'll use the analogy of like, it should be like furniture, it should live with you, like that great chair, and it just gets better the more you sit in it. And I feel like we want our clothes to kind of have that kind of vibe to it and get that kind of use out of it.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. I mean, it brings to mind something that I've often considered in traditional menswear, sort of items that become charged with a little bit of legacy and a little bit of entitlement, like the bow tie, perhaps, or suspenders.
I love it.
Yeah, well, that's the nod to the Southern gentleman.
Yeah.
But these items that at least when I was coming up as a young professional, you sort of didn't wear, because that's what partners at a law firm wore, or that's what managing directors at the investment bank wore, and you couldn't wear it unless you were one of those. So is part of the ethos and part of the that sort of fuck that, wear what you want, or is part of it, when you do design those items, is there a little bit of a ironic statement there that you're kind of taking the Mickey out of that?
I kind of grew up in that traditional menswear vein. I mean, I worked my first job was in a very traditional men's store. We were one of the first shops in the South to carry Ralph Lauren.
Oh, wow.
And so I immediately became, a Ralph Lauren freak, when working in that shop, and, just getting introduced to it. And, it was suits and ties and sport jackets and a little bit of sportswear. So and the gentleman who owned the shop was just an unbelievable, just still one of my style heroes today. He just, everything was perfect, and he just always had the right things on at the right time. So I've always, when we do those types of items, it's a little bit nostalgic in some ways, but yet you want it to certainly have modern application. Right. I love to do a dress shirt with a white collar, and not for Gordon Gekko or for the partners at the law firm, but just to kind of, inject a little bit of that nostalgia, but how can you put it in a modern context? That maybe just for me personally is that sort of nod to traditional menswear. I still think there's relevance there, and I feel like it should be the baseline in a man's wardrobe, not necessarily a white collar shirt, but just those little subtleties, or at least knowing about them. When you're watching, ESPN, you see the announcers come on and they have like a 3-button jacket and all 3 buttons are buttoned. You go, man, somebody get a hold of this guy. Who's in charge?
My favorite is when they got the tie and the pocket square and they match.
That, and then there's like 3 other things going on, and you go, man. And my wife just goes, just relax. Who do you think is there? Do you think they have a stylist on set there? And I'm like, I don't know. They should. Somebody's got to get a hold of these guys.
They do, but that stylist is from Men's Warehouse typically. Honestly, I think if you watch the credit roll, you'll see that. Well, let me touch on that. Sports can inform design. Sports are part of your life. This is a little out of left field, no pun intended, but you are a pretty accomplished baseball coach. So tell us about that. And is there anything in that kind of aligns with the brand, or is that just, a passion project that you and your son share?
Well, I will definitely say it's certainly a passion project for sure. But it does, in some ways, it's been fun to inject a little bit of that into, what we do with the collection. I mean, you had asked before of like having your name on a collection. It does, you have to have, it has to come from a personal point of view. For me, it does at least. And so, yeah, man, I'm a baseball fanatic. I mean, I actually started college as a PE major. And so I wanted to be a coach, and I flunked out as a PE major, which is pretty damn hard to do, but somehow I managed to screw that up. And so when my son got to, the little league age, I started coaching, fell in love with, teaching and being around the kid. It was sort of being able to relive something that I never had a chance to do. And you know, of course, that brings about, you know, you get to design the uniforms and all the swag and the fundraising swag. And
that would be the cool team to be on.
We always showed up with the I will brag on that. We had some damn good looking uniforms.
Man, I can imagine.
And they played well. They did so. I mean, we went to the the Little League World Series, and you know, he's beyond those years, but I still work the kids out, and now they're, you know, a lot of them are going to college, play baseball, and I love it. And I think more than anything else, there is a little bit of relationship, you know, managing people, motivating people. You know, I do, you know, with our team, I try to be somewhat of a coach, and try to develop them and as best I can without trying to take over. But yeah, no, it's something really, really cool. I love it. And, you know, a lot of that swag has ended up in the shop, and we use them for fundraisers and different things. So it's a ton of,
it's your collection item.
Honestly, it's some of my favorite. It's some of my favorite stuff to work on. I guess because I'm such a huge sports fan. I mean, I can't help it. But
and was the company the sponsor of the team? I mean, in my small town playing baseball, you had local sponsors, and so believe it or not, my little league team was called Pottery Shack because that was our sponsor. Not as cool as the Billy Reid team, I can imagine.
There's something about the Pottery Shack. I can see that. We didn't really put the name. I did take, you know, we've got our little branding elements that, you know, are a little striped, and I kind of subtly tucked that into some places. But we were a subtle sponsor, so to speak, kind of a quiet sponsor.
Gotcha.
But it was kind of hard. I didn't want it to look like we were taking over the whole situation. And it probably felt like that anyway. It was intense, man. I treated it like a full-time job on it.
Little League World Series is no joke. I mean, that's a nationally televised game. So yeah,
it was fun. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
What is your Major League Baseball team, or teams plural?
Well, I love the Braves. I mean, I grew up a Braves fan, but I'm also a pretty big Yankees fan as well. So, you know, no offense to anyone who hates the Yankees. There's a lot of haters out there, but
there's quite a few haters down in Atlanta, I think. But yeah, that puts you in rarefied air to be the, you know.
Those are my two. Those are my two teams. But man, I really root for players more than anything else. I mean, I love what's happening to the game right now. You know, Fernando Tatis, Ronald Acuna Jr., just seeing that the energy that it's really kind of lifting the sport, and baseball could use that. A little bit of that, you know, breaking the rules a little bit is a good thing in baseball.
Well, let me ask a slightly politicized question. How do you feel about the Braves name and logo? And are you in favor of changing it? Or, you know, as someone who appreciates legacy and recognizes that, you know, that name and logo have come from Boston and, you know, have been part of the team forever, that it's hard to change things like that?
You know, I try to not mix the political part and sports, even though it's definitely become that. But I think, you know, knowing a lot of folks that work with the Braves and knowing the organization, they really try to embrace it and really try to pay tribute more than they do try to, you know, use it as something in a political situation. They really take great strides in really trying to help the cause, you know, and they have a lot of support from many of the tribes around the country that support keeping the name. You know, I think when you get into like Redskins and things like that, I absolutely see it. You know, you can see where that would be offensive just to people. But I mean, from what I've seen, and this is certainly a novice opinion, I've seen more support from the Native American tribes than I have, descent.
Yeah. Professor at a law school that I teach at, Cardoza Law School, which is in New York City. And he is sort of championing this name change initiative to, you'll get a kick out of this, it's Bravest. And what they've done is they've taken the tomahawk and made it into a fireman's axe, and taken that other iconography and made it into kind of like first responders supporters. It's very clever.
Yeah.
Very,
I could see that.
So you launched your first menswear collection as a standalone eponymous brand under William Reid. And this is back in 1998. How and why did you end up rebranding Billy Reid?
We rebrand. I mean, William Reid, I started in '98, and we, started it in my bedroom while my wife was pregnant with our first child, and it took off, and we moved the company to New York, started doing Fashion Week. Things started to grow. I had a partner at the time who was in the .com business. We won a CFDA award in summer of 2001, and then our next show was September 10th, the day before the terrorist attacks. And after that, everything just started to fall apart. And of course, the .com bubble burst, and perfect storm. It just we had to just restart life, and that's when we moved to Alabama. And my wife is one of 9 children, so we had a great support system, and we just said, look, well, if we can get through this, we can make it work. We'll figure it out, and it was really a little bit of just wanting a fresh start, and no one's ever called me William. It was just, everyone's always called me Billy. And the one thing that I really wanted to happen when we relaunched was I just wanted everything to be real. I didn't want to fake anything. And so that name was real. It also kind of gave it I did have contacts and a little bit of, legacy a small legacy starting to happen at that time. And so it sort of was a good balance of those two things. And no regrets on it, really, as far as making that name change.
Yeah, we're so now under Billy Reid, and still obviously maybe a more authentic eponymous brand. Have there been issues that you faced that relate to just who your partners are, who your investors are, recognizing that to a degree, when they own a stake in the company, assuming that your company owns its trademark, which I assume it does, they're taking a piece of your name, and maybe if you were to really think about it, your legacy. Does that concern you? And how did you deal with investment, given that is what they were investing in?
Yeah, it definitely puts you in, they're investing as much in the company as they are in you, because I'm attached to it. So you definitely want to, you've got to be front and center. You have to be as good or better than the brand itself, because they're, as much, like I said, they're investing in that name, which means they're investing in me. So that's where it kind of can limit, probably the pool of people you may go out to raise capital with. And as well as licensing any other thing, because I'm also, if we are going to do a collaboration or a licensing agreement, for me, I want that to feel real. I don't want to fake it. We're not just going to go, put our name on soup cans or, whatever, just because there's money involved. It really does have, to me, I want that personal attachment. So that can kind of narrow what the opportunities can be, but it also can make the opportunities that do come aboard and you pursue, it can create a little bit of stronger connectivity, better storytelling, because you're coming from a real place. So there's positives and negatives to that.
Does that get stressful personally, Billy? That sort of, you sort of always have to be on. You are this steward of the brand, and that not only your employees, but your investors are all kind of relying on you to be the greatest version of yourself.
Now I feel pressure. Now that you said it.
No. Well, I mentioned
no, I try
because look, we're on both sides of this often.
Yeah.
We represent investors sometimes, we represent brands, and from the investor perspective, it's very stressful to be investing in something where one person, by their just human actions, I'll just John Galliano, right? Or can just blow up all the value that you invested in. It definitely, you definitely want to be your best self at all times, for sure. So there is a little bit of that pressure, but I've tried not to think about it, and really just try to be myself and answer answer questions honestly, speak honestly, and that way I feel like I don't have to backtrack, or you've got to, there is a little bit of pressure in regard to that, but I guess I've just gotten, over the years, gotten used to that. Yeah. Well, and look, don't mean to stress you out at all.
No.
Let's, but you noted.
This call is over.
But you noted, sort of the pivot that you and your brand went through during, just 9/11 and the fallout, the economic fallout, not just from that event, but, from what was going on in the economy. We're obviously at a similar moment right now. Pandemic, almost 2 years behind us, but still, in some sense in full throat, or in, sort of a resurgence. And while certain brands that have made items that maybe are more attuned to a more stay-at-home lifestyle are thriving, many brands are struggling, not only with sales, but also supply chains are really backed up, which So, is this another moment where the fashion industry, needs to retrench, but also can kind of recreate itself for the better?
Yes, big time. Certainly, personally, there was definitely some PTSD. When this happened, when it started to happen, the fear of, wow, this could all fall apart. I have to give so much credit to our team of how we pulled together. Supply chain was a complete mess all over the world. And the juggling that they were able to get through, getting product in, was just phenomenal. They did just top of their game, honestly. And we were all doing it remotely. We realized that we actually worked, in some ways, we worked more organized, through Zoom calls. And that was one of the biggest takeaways, is that we were able to communicate better almost than we were sitting 3 feet from each other. That was a huge deal. But the other thing was just, the collection had gotten so broad, between men's, women's, accessories, tailored clothing, denim, everything in between, that, before you know it, you've got 400 SKUs in a collection. It's not needed, so what it did for us, and I think for a lot of people, is that you go back and you go, what's important? This is too much. It's too much for our supply chain. It's too much for us internally. And it's really, you're almost competing with yourself sometimes on your own rack, because do you need 3 navy coats? Honestly, the customer's not going to come in and buy 3 navy coats. So it helped us kind of focus the assortment. we literally cut the collection in half, from what we offered. And it's definitely, I think, helped us from even communicating our messaging, because it's less to communicate, and it's just a more focused presentation. And if there's anything good that can come from, something so horrible, that could be it. And for just going through it, I mean, resilience, really trying to set yourself up to continue to be resilient, to get through it and come out stronger. 9/11 was certainly that for us. 2008, the financial crisis was, we opened our shop on Bond Street in New York the day the stock market crashed in 2008. So it was like, how are we going to get through this, and
signed,
you realize that
release with that commitment.
At the high, going in at the high. And you realize, some of those things, those life experiences can give you the confidence of, okay, we can get through bad things. Life goes on. How do we do it? How do we remain resilient? And there's hopefully some positivity at the end of this.
Yeah. Well, that's a great answer. And, I'm seeing a lot of brands that have really reevaluated what they are. This notion that a la the Ralph Lauren model, which he's there, that brand is there, but will there ever be a true lifestyle brand that is all things to all people? Probably not. And that's okay. Because I think as you see new consumers come online, they're pretty suspect of something that purports to speak to everybody as well as it speaks to them. And so I think a new focus on maybe just a narrower message and a narrower product line as a result, can just create depth and not sort of, inch deep, but, really, really flat.
You don't need to chase every single trend and every, if athleisure is happening, okay, do you really, is that something you go after? Maybe not, those are the decisions you have to make. And I think as you look at those sort of extensions or, lifestyle extensions, or anything you're doing, I think people see right through the BS. If it's not real, they're going to know it. They're too informed, and they're curious. And I think that's what, as we try to, expand and do projects, again, they have to come from a real place, and something that, your core customers and the loyalists connect to immediately.
Well, speaking of a real place and what a lot of consumers care about, I won't say finally, because I think, consumers have cared about the planet for a long time, but it's been hard to sort of understand the impact of fashion and apparel production and the seasonality of fashion and the wastefulness of that. And this is going back a few years, but locally you planted a cotton field.
We did.
To source your own production along with Natalie Channon, right?
Yes.
Is that still active? And, that's obviously such a beautiful sort of vertically integrated, localized production statement. Just unpack it for us, for the listeners, and talk about it.
Well, first of all, Natalie really, she is an expert in that field, pardon the pun. But she, so yeah, we partnered together on that. And one thing we realized is that we're not farmers. That is for sure. And we planted 10 acres of organic cotton. And we didn't really, at the time, there was such a challenge even finding the seeds. The organic seeds were a challenge. We finally found the seeds. And there's a lot of nuance that comes with trying to grow organic cotton, because it's, for instance, if you want to use machinery, well, you can't use the same machinery that's on a cotton field that's not organic, because all the chemicals are inside the machine. So
Okay.
we didn't have those machines. So, like weeding out the field had to be done by hand. 10 acres, it's impossible. You can't pick the cotton with a machine. You have to hand pick the cotton. So we literally had picking parties, and people showed up. We had friends that have Jim and Nick's, their incredible restaurant chain. They sent 200 of their employees there, and then they cooked for everyone. And then we had music. We made it like we made it a party. Why not, right? And we all hand picked cotton. Wow. And the field is not in. We're not doing it anymore. It just was something we realized was too much of an undertaking, and that we need to leave it to professionals to do it. But we, again, we support using organic cotton, and the farmers that do it. It's incredibly challenging. Yeah. Incredibly challenging. It'd be like us trying to open a restaurant and trying to cook the food as well as go make clothes. I mean, you've got to have people that know what they're doing.
Well, it brings up an interesting, element to the brand and you, which is Shindig. You going back to 2009, have, and I don't know if that first cotton picking party was associated with Shindig or not. Sounds like maybe it was, but you are a big supporter of local artisans, artists, musicians in the community, and bringing them together to perhaps cross-pollinate or just have a great time. So, for the listeners that don't know what Shindig is, maybe talk about it and how that's been a positive for the brand.
Sure. Well, it's turned into sort of a cultural melting pot that just takes food, music, art, photography, novelist, and brings all these people together, very curated into one weekend here in the Shoals. So that it started, and actually you had interviewed Megan McGuire Steele a while back, who was our first public relations, partner. And so the idea when we first started is that we were based in a small town in Florence, Alabama. And I was like, man, we need to get people down here to see what this is about. Let's bring the editors down. Let's take them over to all the recording studios in Muscle Shoals and, show them all, talk about that history. Because at the time, the music documentary was not made. So to me at that point, it's like, hey, this is the greatest story of music that's never been told, and it's right here in our hometown. And so that was a part of it. But obviously we wanted to bring folks down to show them the collection. Our shop was in this old house, and it had a kitchen, and so it felt like sort of an entertainment space. So we brought editors from New York and Los Angeles to Florence for a weekend, and it turned into just this incredible party weekend that we had musicians friends. We all sat around playing music and exchanging songs, and people were bringing moonshine. People were bringing all this bourbon from people just kind of from out of the blue kind of gathered. The local people and people in the region, they came and cooked and they did all of it. And so we took that kind of energy and said, we need to do this again. So the next year we kind of grew it, and we scheduled music acts. We had chef friends come in, and we scheduled dinners and alley parties and concerts, and it just kept blossoming, and before you know it, it became a full-fledged, festival of sorts. And unfortunately, the last couple of years, we haven't had a chance to do it due to COVID, but
well,
we will definitely.
What's the plan going forward?
We're definitely resurrecting it for sure. Yeah. So I would say late summer of next year, we will. It'll be back on the books for sure.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, let's pivot a little bit. I appreciate that you're a reader of the laws of style. Having gone through that maybe a couple of times, for you, you're a creative professional, right? But you've obviously dealt with lawyers, bankers, the white collar professionals.
Sure.
What do you think for you is kind of the most salient law that relates to them? Or if, we could have a nice debate if you'd sort of disagree that the white collar professional should kind of dress as a traditional white collar professional, and you'd like to see them, in t-shirt and jeans.
No, we're not going to go t-shirt and jeans. I personally like, and maybe I'm a traditionalist at heart, but I like to see men dressed. I love seeing a coat and tie done correctly, especially when you mentioned sort of bankers and lawyers and those folks. I feel like it's nothing wrong and nothing against anyone that doesn't wear the coat and tie and do that, because I would say my friends that are lawyers and bankers certainly don't always wear coat and tie. Honestly, if they're not going to trial, they're probably not.
Mm-hmm.
And that means they're probably buying more clothes from us, so that's probably a good thing. But I still like it. I can't help it. It's something you kind of grow up with. Now I love to see people mixing it up too. I'm not against a pair of tennis shoes with a suit, or I don't wear socks with trousers, even in the wintertime. I've always done that. And that goes back to, maybe it's a Southern thing. I don't know. But so there's some laws I may break a little bit myself. And, but there's a lot of, talking about no more than 3 pieces of jewelry, or metal. I'm down with that for sure. I think I've always been like, is it a tie? Is it a pocket square? Is it a tie bar? What are you going with? My dad had a couple that were kind of odd that he, I remember one time him screaming at me. He was so pissed off about something I did. And we were going to a wedding, and I came downstairs, I had a shirt, tie on. He goes, "Do you have an undershirt on?" I was like, "No, sir." "You don't ever leave this house without an undershirt on." I'm like, "Yes, sir." And then I come back down, and he goes, "Do you have a handkerchief? You do not go to a wedding or a funeral. And when you put on a suit, you have a handkerchief in your pocket every time." It's like, "Yes, sir." And that was his two big things. That, and no tank tops, no sweatpants, no ball caps, no chewing gum. That was his. So I remember this kid coming to pick up my sister for a date one time, and literally he had broken all the laws of Larry Reid. And hat, tank top, sweatpants, and chewing gum all at the same time. He goes, "I'm here to pick up Laura Lee." He goes, "No, you're not. Need to go back home and change." Sent the kid home to change, to come back to pick up my sister.
Oh my God. I'm
picturing
like Eminem coming to pick your sister up.
It was like
completely just turned away at the door. Well, yeah, your father had a good short list, I did not manage to make my list short, and brevity is important in
still to this day, man. There's no like chewing gum in the house. He is I don't wear tank tops, so I never really had that issue with him. So
yeah, tank tops, that actually is one of the laws of style. Like, just don't wear the tank top ever. It's just not a flatter. Unless you're a professional basketball player.
Freddie Mercury, maybe,
You're a rock star, then you get away with whatever you want to get away with it. But the suit. So let's talk a little bit about tailored clothing and the suit, because you do a great suit, among other talents that you have. And I think the suit has this great effect of making every wearer, man or woman, by the way, but in particular, I'm talking menswear, kind of achieve that nice eudaimon mien, kind of the classic David, the shoulders broader than the waist, and kind of elongates, and just can help, I don't want to say hide, but not accentuate certain bodily flaws that we all have. But in this new work from home environment, I mean, the suit is being once again called into question. It seems like every 5 years you get some article about the death of the suit. What are your prognostications for the future of the suit? And how are you seeing suit sales these days?
Well, I'll start with the latter. We've definitely seen a decline in the sales of tailored clothing, and a little bit of that has to do with what we've all just gone through. But I still believe in it, and like you said, this goes on about every 5-7 years, where there's discussion that the suit has gone away and no one's going to wear a suit again. And I do think there are some transitions and there's some changes happening in that world. We've started to sell it as separates, and many, just from we've had to, because there's and trying to make jackets that you could pair with a trouser, or you could wear it by itself, cut it in a way that it doesn't look like you're wearing a suit coat with your jeans or your trouser. Mm-hmm. So we've had to kind of balance that out with what the customer is looking for. Now, we still have nested suits. I'm not saying that we don't have any, but in a lot of cases, we've busted them up and sell them as separates. We've also looked at the idea of it, just softer suiting, so slightly more relaxed silhouette, not, softening the inner linings and it creating just a more relaxed shape, which customers honestly have really seem to be attracted to. It's worked, so, but honestly, there's still that person coming in that has to go to a wedding. They have an event to go to. They have a certain need to wear a suit, and it may not be a business situation. It could be a business situation, but so as we look at it, from a selling perspective, well, you can look at and go, suits are down, or tailored clothing is down in business, but you can't walk away from it. The customers, there's still a customer at some point that is going to need to buy a jacket and a trouser and a shirt and potentially a tie, at some point. But it's changing, and you have to kind of evolve with it. But I also think it's something you don't walk away from. And through the pandemic, I think people have laxed somewhat on potentially wearing a jacket and tie, but I don't think it's going to go away. And I actually think that could create an because the minute something swings one way, it swings back the other way.
Yeah. So
I am not predicting the death of the suit.
I hear you. Well, maybe another topic that has gained some traction, and positioning a product that has gained some traction. I'm seeing more and more completely agnostic as to menswear, womenswear brands come online. Mm-hmm. Whether that's driven by gender fluidity, or it's just driven by a design ethos, which is, hey, men can choose to look this way as women can choose to look this way, and I'm not really I'm designing for humans. What do you think of that? Is that something you've ever considered or touched on? Undoubtedly you probably have items maybe more in your menswear slant that women wear.
I think there's a little traction there. I mean, we have men's and women's in the shop, and over the years I've pulled women's pieces and put them with a men's look, for a runway show. Mm-hmm. And vice versa. There's definitely for us, there's a big crossover. Women come in, they'll buy the men's piece. We've started to make extra smalls in some of the men's pieces for, a smaller woman. I've seen, like drawstring pants and women and that men have come in and bought off the women's rack, or a tunic that could be, have some masculine qualities to it that a man may buy from the women's rack. It's probably less men shopping the women's rack, more so women shopping the men's rack.
Yeah.
I do still think you still are, and this is just, I'm speaking personally, that you do make a women's collection, you make a men's collection, but there is this world that so many of those pieces could go either way. And especially when you look at sweaters, you look at coats, you look at shirting, those are things that both, that go both genders are attracted to, and then there's so much similarity there.
Yeah. Well, and, outerwear, certainly, you're now a whole layer removed from the body. So yeah, shape is a bit less relevant.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, let's pivot a little bit and get maybe a little more personal as to your style icons. And so I'll ask, and with no particular, I'll suggest that you give me 3, but you can give me more than 3. And you've already talked about your dad, and so I'm really looking for more listener recognizable style icons, but men or women, for you, who has informed the way that you've put yourself together, as well as the way you've designed the brand.
I always bring this person up, and maybe it's not specifically for style, but I look at style as not just maybe what you're wearing, but a little bit of who you are. Chris Christopherson has always been one for me, just for who he is, his story, a Rhodes Scholar, a pilot, a janitor, becoming, the most amazing songwriter of all time, and to many folks, and an actor, such a Renaissance man. He's always been sort of a little bit of a hero of mine. So I put him, for me, maybe not for a lot of other folks, but I just have a huge crush on him and for what he stands for. I mean, he's definitely one of them. I love what Leon Bridges is doing now. I think he's got a tremendous sense of style and great sense of self and what works for him. John Batiste is another one. I bring him up probably because we grew up near each other, but we've dressed him quite a bit. I think he's just got a tremendous sense of like taking something that's traditional and, adding his own touch to it. I love what I think he's tremendous. And then I will, a little bit lesser known, the man I work for, my first job in a clothing store, he was just impeccable and taught me so much about menswear and all the do's and don'ts and how to do it and what was correct. And that baseline for me has stuck with me in mind to this day. I still look back on that as, and his wife was incredibly stylish too, and or is. They're not, neither one are dead, but they were just, they were my Bonnie and Clyde, so to speak.
It's so interesting how style ultimately gets reduced down to confidence in some ways. It is that stylish person who's wearing something unexpected and not standing in the corner or in the shadows with it, but basically saying, welcome to me, and I'm rocking this, and that, just does that with confidence. Does that inform your design process? I mean, do you want men and women who wear your clothes to not only be comfortable, but obviously, kind of gain some confidence in how they look in this frame that you've created for them?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's a big part of it. You want them to feel just fantastic about what they're wearing, and not from a standpoint of like it's flashy or they're going to just stand out in the crowd because it's flamboyant, but more the subtlety and how do you take the understated and create such a sophisticated and elegant, presentation on yourself where people come, it's like, wow, I love that dress. Or man, you look fantastic. That shirt, where did you get that shirt? Or it's those little things where I think where you are instilling that slight sense of confidence in someone, because some people buying clothes or selecting an outfit or what you're going to wear is daunting to a lot of folks. If you can kind of squelch that just a little bit and start to give them that slight bit of, hey, I feel great about myself, I know I look good, that's those baby steps, so to speak, are very important. It's something we've really tried to work with our customer on doing that. And I think that's why we've had so many loyal customers, is that they've had those experiences, where they may not have been a shopper, so to speak, but they get turned on to it, they get hooked on it, and they get hooked on the fact that they're making an impression, but yet they still feel comfortable about what they're wearing. You don't feel like the clothes are wearing you.
Right.
And I think that's really important.
No, that feedback loop is very important. That first appreciation from a third party, that sort of, you've walked into the room, you already felt pretty good because I've got my Billy Reid on and I'm looking great. And then any feedback, which can be very subtle, obviously, it's just maybe looking at you a little bit longer and you're like, maybe it's because your fly's open, but because you are so convinced, like it actually helps you cock your chin up maybe a little higher, walk a little taller, and then you look even better and get more positive reinforcement. So that must be a very fulfilling part of what you do, to know that people are getting that from your creations.
It's the best. I mean, honestly, that's the best part of it. If you feel like to me, that's why you do it. That's a big part of it for sure.
Well, so we've talked regions. Are there cities in particular that you find, and we'll focus on menswear, that you find men are the most stylish? And just, you can give me as many as you want, but I'd love to hear unexpected ones.
Yeah. Well, I would say New Orleans for me. Again, I grew up there, so it's easy, but I have the diversity of what you see from the mature Southern prototypical, Southern gentleman in the straw hat and the Haspel suit, and that whole vibe, which I love, with the high-waisted pant, and that's still there. But I think when you even taking on the other end of that, when you go into, the neighborhoods and you go into the Marigny or Treme, and you see how the kids can, that don't have a lot in many cases, how they can take things and style it in their own way. And I just think there's an energy there that it's unlike any other. And again, I'm biased, but I see things there every time I go to New Orleans. I see something that inspires me, and in the people, and it's the diversity that's always been there, in the culture, and that to me stands out big time. It really does. I think Charleston has a little bit of, for a different reason, the traditional Southern kind of vibe, and the resort kind of mixed with a little bit of the surf vibe that's happening with the younger kids. It kind of has a cool thing going. And I love Austin, Texas. I think it doesn't evolve very much, in style. I mean, you could go back into, Heartworn Highways documentary and probably see the same things you saw in that movie today in the culture. But I think there's something about the fact that they do it so well, and I dig that. I dig it.
Well, listen, Billy, our time is up.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. I feel like this could be a 4-part series, because as we both know, there are a bunch of questions that I still want to ask, but
Yeah.
let's not test the patience of our listeners. Maybe we'll get a part 2
Yeah.
going, a couple of seasons from now. Any last words, nonprofits that you work for, or shout outs that you want to give before we close?
Yeah, well, I mean, that is, I think one thing we've really tried, since day one, and you hope, I feel that sense of community that we've tried to build. Community is such an overused word now. It really is it's like retail experience. It's the beginning, everyone says it, but we've kind of stuck with it since day one. And, working with people like the Southern Foodways Alliance that really does so much with the farming community and the restaurants, and that creates it can create economic engines in small communities, what they do, and there's subtle ways. I mean, that we're definitely continuing our work there. Certainly Shindig is going to have a lot of components that kind of speak to that as we look towards next year. But no, there's so many folks that we try to work with, but again, we try to do it from a place that is very real to us, and maybe not the biggest organizations, but people that can make an impact. I think it's good. You hope that it's really, for us, we've felt that's a really important way to kind of run our company and really invest in our people in that way, where they feel like they can make a difference. And I think that's been a great part about being in a small town. In some ways you can have an impact on things. We're based on sort of our main street downtown, and when you start bringing young folks in, creative young folks into a small town from all over from Belgium and Los Angeles and New York, Chicago and London, and they come to this small southern town, it's amazing how the energy can change, because the locals who haven't had exposure to that meet these folks, and that creates relationships. And it's just been the coolest thing to watch. It really has, and it's been a neat thing to be a part of. And
well, we're definitely, we definitely seem to be at a heightened moment of exodus from traditional urban centers to little pockets of creativity, which I think is very, very exciting. I mean, traditionally the artist, has not been able to afford to live in the large urban center, and even more so today. But that's a great insight, and I'll get my seersucker and bow ties ready for Shindig 22.
You're in, baby. You're in.
And I'll have my listening ears on. And we didn't even get into bands. We didn't, but
man,
we'll get another one going soon.
Just kind of starve yourself for about 3 days before you come down, so you can just eat it all up, baby.
Sounds good. All right. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in, and till next time, take care.
Laws of Style with Douglas Hand. For more information, go to our website at www.hballp.com. And you can also follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Hand of the Law. Thank you for tuning in, and stay stylish.